I made the ultimate edge to the garden bed in my front yard with zero experience. I didn't even have the first tool to complete this project. However, after a couple of days, I was able to upgrade my curb appeal from the existing boring border around my mulch bed to this awesome paver edging that will last a lifetime. The first step of this project is to determine your perimeter. I drew inspiration from these two YouTube videos. If it wasn't for them, this project would have never happened. However, they suggest after determining your perimeter, the next step is to level. I disagree. I think that the next step is to dig your trench. I'm not saying that this is the right way and the way that they did it was wrong, but what I am suggesting is if you're planning on leveling first, then you need to make sure that your line is far enough away from where you plan on digging the trench. The tools needed to dig your trench are an edging tool, a wheelbarrow, a garden shovel, a tarp, and a garden hose and nozzle attachment. Digging is by far the hardest part of this project. What can make this project harder is if you decide to do it during the middle of July, which of course is what I did.
Phone overheated. Ooh. I'm overeating. Oh.
I suggest choosing a nice fair weather day in the middle of fall or spring to build your garden edge. Once you've determined your perimeter, you want to use the edging tool to edge out the border of your perimeter. However, if you're like me and your bed layout is based off your existing mulch bed, then I would suggest going far enough so that way your mulch isn't spilling into your trench. A tip when using the edging tool, once you have it into the ground, tilt back and use your body weight to lift the ground up. This will make it much easier digging the trench in the future. Another tip, if your ground is really hard or rocky, I suggest wetting it beforehand so that way it loosens up the soil, making digging your trench a little easier. The depth that we want our trench to be at is around 5 to 6 inches. Unfortunately, not only did I dig my trench too wide, I also dug it too deep. If you dig too deep, you're going to have to backfill like me. This may sound obvious, but have a plan for where your dirt is going to go. At the end of the day, I had a tarp full of dirt from where I dug my trench, and I had no clue where I was going to put it. So do a little planning ahead and think of where you're going to put your dirt after you dig your trench.
So, all that dirt for that trench. Yeah. I think it looks pretty good. Now, we want this to be at least 5 inches deep, and I'm probably going to say that it's going to be deeper than that, unfortunately. So I'll probably need to go back and backfill a lot of this, I'm assuming, which is not as fun.
All that I did on day one was get all the tools I needed for this project, dug and backfilled.
And I had to move all of that dirt. So
moving on to day two, I really wanted to figure out how to level, and I did. The tools that you'll need to buy for leveling are stakes, hammer or rubber mallet. You'll need both for this project, so either works fine here. Line, masonry line in particular, a line level, and a tape measure. First, you're going to determine where the highest spot of your wall is going to be, and make that your reference point. For my wall in particular, I want my pavers to be sticking 2 inches above the ground next to my porch, which is my highest spot in elevation, and everything will be level off of that reference point.
Either based off of that 2 inches off the ground or off that 2 inches off the ground. But I think that that is our high spot. Actually, I feel like I know it is.
The reason I had so many difficulties on day one was because my line wasn't tight enough. If you don't have a tight enough line, it's always going to show that it's level due to the line sagging. So make sure that your line is very tight in between your stakes. I use knots for both ends of my reference point that I'll show here, but otherwise I just wrapped the line once around my stakes and continued off of that. Once you have leveled your line across the perimeter of your border, this can be used as a reference point for where the top of your border will sit. This should be the top of the border, this string line, because that's 2 inches off the ground right here next to the side of my house. The next step is unfortunately a lot of boring math and measuring. This boring math is used to determine how much paver base you'll need, how much paver sand you'll need, and how many pavers you need. I'm going to use my situation as example. Scroll to the end of the video at this timestamp to see this boring math. Again, I do suggest sticking around to the end because this is a necessary part in completing this project. Which leads us to our next step, which is filling your trench with your paver base, sand, and foundational layer of pavers. The tools that you need to buy for this step are paver base, paver sand, pavers, at least a 4-foot long level, a small torpedo level that can fit across the width of your trench, make sure it's not too big, a rubber mallet, a 5-gallon bucket, optional, garden gloves, optional, garden hoe, optional. I used the garden hoe to break up clumps of my paver base when it turned wet, and tamper, optional. If digging was the hardest part of this build, this is the most tedious part of the build. First, you want to fill your trench up with 2 to 3 inches of your paver base. These next few steps are a little interchangeable. After pouring in 2 to 3 inches of your paver base, you want to see if it's level across the length and width of your trench. With the mist setting on the hose, you want to spray your paver base. After spraying your base with the mist setting on your hose, you want to tamp it in either with your foot, like me, or with a tamper. Every YouTube video you watch will suggest using a tamper. However, you need to make sure that your tamper is going to be small enough to fit across the width of your trench. At the time, I thought I wasn't going to have a tamper that would fit in my trench, so I ended up using my foot, which ended up working just fine. After this, we're going to want to add in around 1 inch of leveling sand. Then we're going to repeat the process. Level lengthwise and widthwise across your trench, spray with the mist setting, and tamp. We really want to make sure that everything is level in this foundation, because this is what the rest of our garden wall will sit on. After putting in your base and your paver sand, now we're going to want to add in our base layer of pavers. If you're using tumbled pavers like me, I suggest laying it flat side down and the tumbled side up. If we've dug a 5 to 6 inch trench, we want our pavers to sit around 1 to 2 inches below the ground. Again, we're going to make sure that they're level lengthwise and widthwise. In my opinion, using the rubber mallet is almost necessary in making this happen. You want to measure from the top of your base layer of pavers to your leveled string line to make sure that it's at the right measurement to continue with the rest of the build. There's somewhat of an art to it. I spent longer during this second day putting in my base layer of pavers than I did the entirety of the rest of the project. My biggest suggestion is to don't overcomplicate it. Transitions to a higher elevation are by far one of the hardest things to grasp when making this project happen. What helped me understand it the best is when you're building your base layer of pavers, eventually you're going to run into the ground. Before you get to that point, you want to add in more base and then start your second layer. At some point during this project, I found out that my pavers were the wrong dimensions from what I thought they were. I thought that my pavers were 3 inches wide and 4 inches tall, but they were the exact opposite. They were 3 inches tall and 4 inches wide.
Oh no.
With all of this accumulating in day 2, the heat, the wrong dimensions, fighting these tumbled pavers to make sure they're level, I almost wanted to quit. Everything was going wrong and taking too long to get level. It was the hottest week of the year, and this project should have been done by now. Thankfully, my neighbor Isaiah came through at a clutch... Thankfully, my neighbor Isaiah came through and gave me the energy boost I needed to keep going. If it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would have finished this project within the weekend. Moving on to day 3. The majority of this project was completed this day.
If you'll notice today, I'll have on jeans because I got sunburnt. So, that's why I got my jeans. Last night, I went and bought more paver base and paver sand to because I know I dug too deep of a hole, so I think I'm gonna need more, but we should have enough now and we should be good. So let's do it.
I got a lot more footage on day 3, which was mainly due to positioning my camera better in the shade. This is a good thing because this ended up being the best day. I got the base layer of pavers in my lowest elevation spot completed. This was a huge win in day 2.
So my neighbor came and he did from about right here to here, but pretty much got the second row in.
It is absolutely crucial to make sure that everything is level lengthwise and widthwise before adding your second layer of pavers, because once you put the adhesive down, that's it. I suggest using a rubber mallet where necessary. One of the next and final steps is to glue your second layer of pavers. The tools that you'll need to buy are a caulk gun and landscape glue or construction adhesive, and a horsehair brush. A horsehair brush is probably too particular, but I found out it ended up working the best. You can just use any handheld brush. At the end of day 2, I thought that my caulk gun was broken. However, this wasn't the case.
So I thought this caulk gun was junk, but it has a little thing at the end of it to break the seal. It's clearly what it's for. The more you know.
You want to brush the top of your base layer and then the bottom of your next layer of pavers before gluing it together. I forgot this step often, and my wall is still okay. However, we want to make sure that we're getting the best permanent connection between our base layer and any additional layer of pavers in our garden wall. Also, when adding each additional layer, you want to make sure that the next layer is sitting on the 2 base pavers below it. If you're using tumble pavers like me, you want to make sure that you're putting adhesive on the high spots on your tumble pavers. This is where your pavers are going to sit, so you want to make sure that you have glue in these areas in particular. Also, be sure that you don't glob any glue or adhesive, and make sure that none is visible in the front of your border. If this happens, just make sure that you have a paper towel handy to clean it up. No matter how straightforward your wall is, at some point you're going to have to chisel. Unless you've measured and done the perfect math to make sure that the pavers fit exactly within your wall perimeter. The tools that you need to buy in order to chisel are simple: a hammer or mini sledgehammer, masonry chisel, and construction pencil. First, you'll want to mark around all 4 sides with the pencil where you want to break the paver. Then you want to score the paver around each 4 edge and around the corners, making sure that all of the scores match. If done right, which in my experience is about a 50-50 shot, your paver should break cleanly along that scored edge. If not, it's not the end of the world. Usually you can beat in the end to make sure that you get the flattest edge possible.
It's not perfect, but and again, not a lot on this is, so it's got personality though, and that's what matters. All right. So here's something funny. Right there on that stone is a hot spot. So I'm gonna place this here.
I talked about transitioning from a lower elevation to a higher elevation. It's much harder when you're going from a higher elevation and trying to guess where that base layer of paver needs to go for your lower elevation. You'll see me struggling with this pretty hard, but I eventually ended up figuring it out, which was a huge win.
Finally.
As I previously explained, I thought that my pavers were 4 inches tall instead of 3 inches. With this in mind, I wanted my edge to sit 2 inches above the ground at my 2 highest points in elevation on my lawn, which is next to my porch and towards the center of my edge. Now my border is sitting exactly level with the ground instead of the 2 inches above that I'd planned for.
How close I am to my ground. This was supposed to be 2 inches, by the way, above ground level. And now, because I have these 3-inch pavers, I think I'm probably right at it. What do you think? Just knock off some of the dirt around here. That's what I think. I think I'm going to do that right now, actually.
To fix this, I decided I would dig in those high areas to make sure that my pavers were still visible and still 2 inches above my front lawn. Grass is now growing in these areas, and you can't even tell where I had to dig in order to fix this huge mistake. Chiseling is hard, and sometimes I wasn't always able to get the perfect clean break. However, it is super rewarding whenever you make a custom paver to fit. This was especially true with the paver on the end of my wall by the sidewalk. Check it out.
That's been the best one yet. Man. That is perfect.
Here I'm placing the final paver to my garden wall and sticking it all together.
It's close enough to me, brother.
My neighbor Isaiah, who came in on day 2 to help me with the wall, and my wife even made guest appearances to witness the final layer being placed. The last and final step of this project is adding your drainage and support system. This is an important step to make sure that your paver edging lasts a lifetime. The tools to buy for this are landscape fabric, scissors, drainage rock, river rock, or pea gravel, and then landscape fabric pins. So you want to spread your fabric behind the wall in your trench. Depending on what your border looks like, you can piece together your fabrics, but it made more sense for me to have one fabric spanning the length of the perimeter of my wall. We want the width of our fabric to hold at least 1 inch of our drainage rock behind our wall in the trench. I guesstimated around 2 foot and it worked out perfect. Next, roll the rock like a burrito using the fabric. I didn't have pins at the time, but if I did, I would have pinned it into my mulch bed. What you'll see me doing here is I bought 4 bags of pea gravel, so I divided my border into 4 even sections, making sure that I was evenly distributing my drainage rock across my border. Technically, this is the last step to making the border, but I wanted to show the full process. So we move into day 4. I backfilled the visible trench in front of my border and then tamped it in with my foot to best match my front lawn. I think most everyone will have to do this step unless you've dug the perfect trench where your width of your pavers fit exactly in there. If you've made it to this point in the video, I want to say thank you. I really do appreciate it. If you've learned something new or have enjoyed it up to this point, please consider leaving a like, comment, or subscribing. On the last day of this project, I just wanted everything to look more aesthetically pleasing. So all I needed to do was replant the plants where I wanted them, pin down my landscape fabric,
And then everything pinned. So now it's kind of pulled away.
and then put new mulch over the existing fabric. This project was really hard, but it was well worth it to upgrade the curb appeal and value of my home. I would suggest that anyone do it if you have an extra 2 to 3 days, and if I can do it with 0 experience, so can you. Again, thank you if you've stuck around to the end of the video, and please consider leaving a like, comment, and sharing. I appreciate all the support. Thank you. Okay, so either you've jumped ahead in the middle of the video or you've stuck around to the end. So this is all of the math that pretty much determines how much base, sand, support, drainage rock, and pavers that we need to buy. As you can see, there's a lot to it, but it's really not that bad. It's all simple math. I'm going to try to make this as digestible and short and concise and clear as possible. So hopefully this is helpful, because it would have helped me if I had something like this to go off of. Anyway, so this black is the outline of my porch, and this blue line is the outline of my trench / border. Using my pavers as an example, I thought mine were 3 inches wide. Really, they were 4, and I probably dug it way wider anyway. But let's just say that my trench is 1/2 foot wide, 1/2 foot deep. That's somewhat what I planned for. I think I planned for 5 inches wide, 5 inches deep. But let's just be conservative, and I would recommend being conservative. Then you want to measure the perimeter of your this is the first step, the perimeter of your border. And my perimeter was 33 linear feet. You could probably get these things at like a sand or gravel pit, but for a small project you probably are just going to buy bags of sand or base. Typically speaking, 1 bag of sand or base is going to cover 5 square feet per inch. Knowing this, we can see the square feet per inch of our perimeter. So if we take the 33 feet, the linear feet of our trench, the perimeter, times the 1/2 foot in width of our trench, we find out that our trench is 16.5 square feet per inch. Knowing our square footage of our trench, and 1 bag of sand can cover 5 square feet per inch, then we know that if you get 4 bags, that's roughly going to cover 1 inch of your trench, whether it's base or sand. And we only want 1 inch of sand across all of our trench, and this was pretty accurate. I bought 4 bags of sand and I used every bit of it. Now, to determine how much base we're going to use, if we're going to plan on using 2 to 3 inches of base. Also, I thought my trench was 5 inches by 5 inches initially is what I was planning for. So I ended up having to buy more bags of base and sand. But if I would have done conservative math from the beginning, I would have found out, I'm going to be covering 3 inches of my trench in base, so I need to buy 10 bags of base. I bought 10 bags, and I think I only have like 1/4 of a bag left, so I used 9.75 bags of base. So it's pretty spot on. That's pretty much how you determine how much paver base and sand you need. One more thing to note is your drainage rock or your support system. In my head, I just wanted 1 inch behind my wall or behind my edging to use as a supported / drainage system. I essentially bought the same amount of pea gravel as I did sand. So ended up working perfect for me as well on that front. Now, we can look at how many pavers we need. This is where it gets a little more complicated. First, I need to start off with how tall are your pavers. So I thought my pavers were 4 inches. So we're going to continue doing math off of those 4 inches, but here is actually what my pavers looked like. You can see it's 3 inches high. I got these 2 measurements backwards, but it's okay. It ended up working out all right. Use your tape measure to measure all around this trench. It's going to be 6 inches. What we want to do now is we want to measure from the bottom of this trench to the string line. So from the bottom to the string line, and that's what we're going to use to determine how many layers of pavers that we need. And I kind of used this graphic, and that's what I had in my head whenever I was like, okay, how many layers am I going to be in this area, in this area, in this area, right? So it was probably 8 inch or 7, 8 inches, 7, 8 inches, and then boom, right here it's 9 inches. Well, that's going to be more than the top of 1 paver, right? So now I'm going to need to start transitioning here, and this is going to be 2 layers. So wait till I get to 12 or 13, wait till I get to 13. Okay, right around here is where I get to 13. And just so on and so forth.
I kind of have at each spot a place where it goes from 3 pavers, which is right here, and then as we go left, this section will be 2 pavers, and then somewhere in here it'll just be 1 paver up against the side of the house. And similar to here, I mean, the transition happens fast, so it goes from 3 to 2 just in that short span, then 1. All through right here should be 1, and then back to 2, all the way up until the curb.
the whole gist of this is once you have got those areas marked, now you want to measure those areas, right? So the total length of 3 layers ended up being 11 linear foot, or around 11 linear foot. And then I measured my 2 layer areas, which was here, here, and here, and that ended up being 16 linear foot. And then right here, let's say this is like 1 foot and 5 foot. So I just added up all of my layers for each section. And if you add all this up, you're gonna see that it equals exactly my perimeter, 33 feet. I know it's complicating, but hopefully that's as digestible as possible. Essentially, we're going across here and measuring with our tape measure to our string line to determine where transitions occur and how many layers we're going to be using in that specific area, and then breaking it down to determine how many pavers we need in that specific area. So now we can move on to the next point, which is determining your paver length. The way that I did it when I was at the hardware store is I had keystone pavers, so I took 2 keystone pavers and then measured across there. I put 14 because that's how long I said it was, and that's what I based my math off of, but I ended up doing bad math again and ended up getting lucky. So we're just gonna do it the right way, which would be to look and see, you know, how long your pavers are. So if you do 8.2 plus 6.2, that's 14.4 divided by 2, which is 7.2 inches. So in actuality, that's how long my pavers are, 7.2 inches roughly, which is 0.6 feet. Anyway, now we know how long our pavers are, how long each area is where I'm using a certain amount of pavers, whether it's 3, 2, or 1, 3 pavers high, 2 layers. 2 pavers high, 2 layers, or 1 paver high, 1 layer. And now it's just math again. So for my 3 layer areas, which for me was just this section right here, I know I need 11 foot worth of pavers, and 1 paver is 0.6 feet. So doing that math, I'm going to need around 18.3 pavers per layer. Since it's 3 pavers high, 3 layers, if you multiply that by 3, that is 55 pavers. Okay, put that off to the side. For my areas where I have 2 pavers high, or 2 layers, which is here, here, and here, I can use that same 16 total linear foot that I added between the 3 areas and then divide it by 0.6 feet of my paver length, and that gets me around 26.6 pavers per layer, which is roughly around 54 pavers in those areas, rounding up. And then for the final layer, I just have a 6 foot area to cover, which is here and here. So for the 1 layer areas, we do 6 foot divided by 0.6 foot for the length of 1 paver. I need 10 pavers total. And if we add all of these up, we get 55 plus 54, which is 119 pavers. So that's how you determine how many pavers you need, and paver base and sand. And this number for me ended up not being as accurate. I think I used a total of 107. What is that, 12 off? And a lot of it's just because, you know, you're not fitting it exactly. You're kind of piecing them together, and there's some air gaps in there. Or at least it was for my wall. But I would say this is a pretty safe. If you were to buy 120 pavers, if I were to buy 120 pavers, I'd have been way over. I'd have been 13 over from what I used. But I'm just saying that in general, that's a safe number to achieve if you're using keystone tumbled pavers, for sure. Might be a different story if you're using square, rectangular pavers, or whatever it is you're using. But this is the math that I used, and again, I didn't even do it right my first time, but this is the math I should have used. It's essential to knowing how much you need to buy and that you're not overspending, essentially. And I don't think any other YouTube video is showing this. So if you don't care, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks.